Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast, but we're now a Star Trek podcast in general. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Voyager Season 1, Episode 10, State of Flux. Before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek podcast.
That is correct. And as I say every single week, you should find us and follow us because we're great, we're awesome, we're a good time, and we will continue to bring you what we feel is top-notch Trek content in spite of whatever may be out there on the airways. Looking at you, Star Trek Academy fans. So that's all we're going to say about you. We got to say it slow because some of y'all, woo! Anyway, yeah, that's me throwing a little bit of shade at that show. I may come around in a few years. Who knows? It took me a while to warm up to Enterprise, but we'll see. But as David said, we're not here to talk about any of those. We're here to talk about Star Trek Voyager's episode, State of Flux. Now, of course, as always, before we jump right into our discussion of the episode, we like to give each other a little bit of a recap of what we've been up to over the past week, because sometimes this is the only time David and I have to actually speak with one another. Not necessarily the case this time, but here we are. So, with that being said, David, how has your week been?
Yeah, it's been 2 weeks for us. I guess you were feeling a little under the weather last week.
But... Oh, yeah. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
we'll get to that.
Okay, good. We did get a chance to meet up with some friends this week, so we got to hang out at an arcade bar. It was fun playing some of those old arcade games. Man, some of those are just brutal. Like, the difficulty level is just like, oh, gosh, man. But I'm a sucker for pinball, so I'm always down for a good game of pinball, even though I feel like a lot of pinballs are like rigged. You know, the ball is designed to go down and you lose it. You can't stop it. That's just, how dare you? But anyway, what's up with me? So last time we checked in, I had started reading Flags of Our Fathers, and I finished it a little while ago. Great book, really poignant. I watched the movie by Clint Eastwood by the same name. He filmed Flags of Our Fathers and the Japanese language film Letters from Iwo Jima back to back, and they were released back in 2004, I believe, back to back as well. One in October, in Flags of Our Fathers, I think in October of 2004, and then in December, Letters from Iwo Jima. Letters from Iwo Jima is the better film because it's filmed. It's the story is just told straight. There are a few flashbacks for some of the characters to get some of their backstory throughout the film, but they're minimal and they're only there to service the storytelling. But because the movie Flags of Our Fathers is based on the book Flags of Our Fathers, it is trying to do a lot and it jumps around way too much. It jumps back to the battle. It jumps ahead to after the battle and the problems for the soldiers after they came home. And while the book is really interesting, it has a lot to say about, post-traumatic stress disorder and the issues of people who are feeling guilty for surviving a traumatic event, war, while their buddies were, killed. The movie had a harder time really communicating that well. They have a number of good actors in the film, but the main cast was a little off. And so the main cast sometimes weren't particularly good, unfortunately. Though the one guy who plays the Native American, while he was not so great, the one scene where he had a crying scene, and that was really he pulled that scene off. I don't know what made it work that time, but that scene was great. However, the funny thing about the book and therefore the movie Flags of Our Fathers is that it's now outdated. The book is based on the idea that the 6 men who raised the flag at Iwo Jima, it's that famous, picture of the 6 men raising the flag. Turns out that the book operates under the assumption that the author's father was one of the 6 men. And that was, for the longest time, believed he was one of the 6 men. But in 2016, the Marines did a retroactive reconsideration of the picture and who was actually in the picture of the flag raising, and they actually say that John Bradley and at least one other guy that they originally thought was in the picture. The two of the guys that survived, there were three guys who survived the battle of the six who raised it. Well, it turns out two of those three guys actually are not part of the flag raising picture.
Hmm.
You read the book, you watch the movie, and you're all for all the details. You know, John Bradley, one of the guys who supposedly raised it, like he didn't talk about it for his whole life with his family. He refused to talk about it. It was his way to deal with it, is that, you know, I don't want to keep thinking about it. I want to move on with my life. But he never directly claimed that he was not one of the flag raisers. He said that he wished he hadn't been a flag raiser, that he wouldn't have been, you know, wouldn't have had paparazzi following him around all the time. But the the revision in 2016 is to say that actually no, he was not one of these flag raisers. The book makes the case that the reason these men felt bad about all the paparazzi and all of the fame they got is that it was just a moment that they even forgot about. Like, you know, it happened real quick. They raised the flag up, but then the battle continued on for a whole other month. You know, lots of people died. It was one of the worst battles in the World War II. And so for these six guys, you know, three of them die. For the remaining three, the ones that thought had lived, or that were a part of the picture, that is, you know, for them, they're like, that was such a small moment in an otherwise very traumatic experience. And so the idea that it turns out that even those guys weren't even a part of the flag raising kind of blows your mind. Like, I read this whole book about the subject. I thought like this was a thing. So it was funny. I was reading the Wikipedia page afterward just to find out more details about the original author of the book, because again, he was the son of one of the guys they thought raised the flag. And then like as I was reading it, it said, and he didn't raise the flag. I was like, who the hell went on Wikipedia and edited this and was a jerk? He was like, put some nonsense in here. And then I followed up on it. I was like, oh, turns out they revised who they think it actually is. They compared the pictures of the six guys to other pictures at the time. And anyway, so it's just a crazy situation. But that's what I did about 2 weeks ago. Ever since then, I did start reading the Children of Blood and Bone book that we had mentioned. And it's definitely aimed at a teenage female audience.
Yeah.
So I've been reading it. I mean, early on, I was really rolling my eyes. I was like, you know, it has the problem of, I realize this is true of my own writing, of like when you're trying to start a story, you do a lot to try and kind of force the audience sometimes to like understand what's going on. It's hard to be subtle sometimes. Um, I would argue that she's a little too. Basically, the problem with a book like this is that the author gives you so much detail about what the characters are thinking and what's going on that there's not a lot of room for the reader to involve themselves in thinking about the situation and building up the parts that are missing. You know, I'm not. There's no part of this book that really allows me to like fill in gaps. All of the gaps are filled for me by the author. But by the end, I mean, she is willing to go to some rough places. This is definitely a book where some bad things happen to people, and I'm willing to give the second and third books a try once I get around to them. But when I first started, I was like, "Oh man, this might be a slog."
Well, you know, you're not wrong. That's one of those things that like, you know, when I said I had started reading a little bit of it, and for me it was challenging in the sense of needing to get over that so I can hurry up and get into the story.
Right.
You know, and recognizing that this is told from a perspective, a frame of reference that I don't have and will never have, and I need, and you know, and so just instead of being mad that the book doesn't immediately relate to my narrow corner of life, that
Hmm.
you know, I need to, you know, just go with it and enjoy the story. So
Right.
that's what it became. It's like, just get this because this is obviously it's a part of the story. This is information I'm going to need. Let me, you know, do that. So yeah, I'm I'm hoping that this gets better. I'm hoping that the series turns out to be worth it, especially since they're already, it's been greenlit to be a movie and so forth. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping we get there for that. I can see it. I can see the reason why. You know, doing this one a little bit different, trying to read the series before watching anything that's produced from it versus
Right.
doing the Expanse, where we watched the Expanse and then, excuse me, watched the Expanse and then went back and read the books, and there's just so
Yeah.
much more
Hmm.
there.
Hmm.
By the way, I plan on within the next couple of weeks getting that game on uh,
Osiris Rising.
Osiris. Yes, there's a game out for those of you who are Expanse fans. There's a game called Osiris Rising. It's available right now for download through Steam, and I'm sure a whole host of other places as well. It looks
Reborn.
great.
I'm sorry. Osiris Reborn.
Um, yeah, there are several different platforms you can get it on. There's a lot of promos. I would suggest going to YouTube and looking at some of the videos that have already been put up for it. It's a really nice looking, very visual game. I'm looking forward to getting into the story and seeing what that's about, and going from there. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
As for myself, over these last few weeks, yeah, I was really sick last week. That first and foremost, I mean, it's just like whenever sickness comes through my household, we all get shut down. Um, um, it was pretty terrible. I'm not really sure what you would call that. I mean, just always saying it's like the flu kind of bothers me because I mean, it can't just always be the flu. It's got to be something else, and especially when it's so severe. I mean, I was super tired. I couldn't focus on pretty much anything. I was dragging through work and other responsibilities. I have not been able to work out like at all because I was just so weak and just like forever exhausted all the time. Even so much so that when David and I got together with some other friends of ours, that was like really the first true day of me feeling okay to go out. And so even then, like we were out and everything else. By the end of the night, I was like, I've got to go. I'm so sleepy. I'm so tired. I have got
Right.
to get home. And yeah, it's like as soon as I got home, I think I was asleep fairly quickly. I was at least laying down fairly quickly, and then I think I talked for a little bit and then was out.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, in addition to reading um, um, Blood and Bone, I have also picked up another book. This one was recommended to me as well. I'm going to share it with you all right now. It's called The Edge of Space Time. This was
Hmm.
recommended by another Star Trek fan. They also have a growing podcast as well as a YouTube channel where they do theirs is like strictly shorts. They don't do a whole discussion like this, but they just kind of give you little shorts and snippets about like their favorite characters or situations that they noticed and things like that. It's very observational, also quite humorous. And during one of their shorts, they did talk about having picked up this book, reading it, and how it kind of fits in with the overarching theme of Trek in general, which is um, the need for a basic understanding of science and how science plays an important part in our world even today, and how we can
Hmm.
use it to shape a better worldview for the future. It's not so far what I've been reading of it. I don't think of it as overwhelmingly like um, preachy or any of those things. I think it's very interesting the way they present a lot of different uh, heady science topics. Um, so if you're not a person who's necessarily familiar with a lot of different science terminology, but you are a sci-fi fan, you know that there's the whole they love to cloak everything in metaphor and colloquialism, right? Like they'll give you a very complicated explanation for something. Like in Star Trek, for example, we call it technobabble, right? So
Yeah.
someone will give you a very long blah 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 whatever explanation, and then there'll be someone else who comes behind and it's like, it's kind of like when you pop a tire or let the air out of a balloon or whatever. Like they dumb it down, right?
Right.
That's what this author does for a lot of current science concepts. She also relates them to people and experiences, and there's stuff in here about different culture, art, philosophy, all these things that she kind of that she tackles as she talks about um,
space time and space fabric and how certain ideas work and things like that. So I'm very much in the initial stages of the book. So I'm looking forward to getting deeper into it. But I've really enjoyed what I've read so far. I think that it's really cool to see a scientist relate things across the board like that. I mean, she's quoted different poets, mathematicians, all kinds of people while she's making her connections to these very heady scientific concepts. So
Right.
again, if you're looking for a way to begin to access those things, if you've ever felt like, physics, astrophysics, cosmology, any of that was beyond your grasp, I really suggest you pick up this book and give it a read. It's a great way to kind of at least give you some um, somewhat of a foundation and maybe even a roadmap to how to access those things further as you decide to do so. So go ahead and do that. The other book, of course, so now I'm on book 3 that I'm working my way through here, is I have decided, even though I did say I was going to take a break from these guys, I have decided to go ahead and start reading the new book in the series from James S. A. Corey, The Mercy of Gods.
Nice.
The reason being, they just put out the second book in this series, and I
Yeah.
don't want to be super far behind.
Yeah.
So it's just like, let me go ahead and at least get started. I'm not going to rush it because
Right.
obviously I'm reading other things. But I just don't want to suddenly find myself with them on like they've released book 5 and I haven't even started book 1 yet.
Yeah.
So that was my only guiding light on that.
I went to the bookstore on April 14th, so a little over a week ago, the day it came out, and bought the second book, The Faith of East is what it's called. And it was great to find it because it was in the new release section, and there were only 2 books left. Like, it clearly had other people that are clearly grabbed and bought a couple copies. So I was like, yes, I got one day of. Wonder who else got it, kind of thing. I obviously haven't read The Mercy of Gods yet either, but yeah, we'll get to that one soon enough.
Absolutely, we will. And several other things as well. I know that we had talked about a while back doing kind of a breakdown of The Count of Monte Cristo, both the book and the movie. We still need to do that. So a lot of things we've talked about doing here content-wise on the show while we're working our way through and also kind of figuring this out. I think it's funny whenever I think about our show, I think it's always interesting how even though we've been doing this for a while, I still feel like there's a lot of things we haven't even begun to touch on and a lot of ways we can change the show and hopefully make it better for those few of you who watch us and whatever. So whether you are a first time listener, viewer, or someone who likes to stop in from time to time, we appreciate you and just know new things are coming your way.
Right.
But we're not here to talk about all that. We are here to talk about Star Trek Voyager and State of Flux, or as I like to call it, the Chakotay is Stupid episode. Um, we're going to get into that, which I think it's painfully obvious if you've watched this. Now, again, if you have not watched this episode, what are you doing? The show is almost 30 years old. Go watch it and then come back, and then you can, critique what we say appropriately. But everything can be found on Paramount Plus, of course, until they pull it or something happen, or Paramount truly becomes the station of Taylor Sheridan, and all you'll be able to watch is Taylor Sheridan shows ad nauseum. So anyway, with this
Lots of
episode,
ads for those I was seeing
oh
today.
my God, like the man
He has
has
like
like
a
8,
million
9
shows.
shows, right? I was just
Yeah.
like, Jesus Christ, how many shows can you film in Montana? Like the whole
Yeah.
state is basically owned by this man.
Yeah.
So
And I have to assume they're all interrelated in the sense like they're not happening in separate
no,
story universes.
no, they all are. They are all part of the Taylor Sheridan verse. They
Yeah.
all are. I'm just waiting. I guess like is he building like a weird kind of movie base? He's going to do one giant movie that shows how all these things connect together, or what? But yeah,
I mean,
they
they've
are
got
all
Harrison Ford and
Harrison Ford, Helen Mirren.
that's good. Yeah, that's what I was
I
thinking
think those are the 2 top. No,
He's
because
got
he's got
um,
Zoe Saldana, he's got Nicole Kidman, Morgan Freeman,
Morgan Freeman. I don't know about that one. Oh man,
because they're all in the show Lioness,
okay.
and
Well,
then
there's the
he's
one
got
with
uh
Michelle
got still
Pfeiffer is the new
that's the
one.
newest one,
Yeah,
and that's got Kurt Russell and Michelle Pfeiffer. He's got
that's it. Yep.
Billy Bob Thornton and Landman. He's got there's
He's got
someone else.
everybody. He's got
Yeah,
everybody.
pretty much. Yeah, they're just everybody's there. You know, they're all there. So, um,
But you know what's funny is that Paramount Plus doesn't have the one show that started it all. It doesn't have Yellowstone.
Yellowstone. It doesn't have
It,
Yellowstone.
it was the funniest thing about watching the ad tonight. It was like it all roads lead to Paramount Plus or something, and I was like, except the one. For some reason, it's apparently on NBC. So, who knows?
Oh man, it's ridiculous. But before he takes over everything, you can still watch at least Star Trek and some Star Trek related stuff there. So go
Right.
ahead and do so. But I just want to say, yeah, we're going to go ahead and talk about this episode. Did you want me to give the recap, or did you want to do it?
Go for it. I think I did it last time. Yeah.
Okay. So this episode starts off with our crew down on some random planet where they're collecting what they hope to be great foodstuffs. They're being led, of course, by Neelix, who I will stand by is the worst character to be assessing your food needs, considering that he is an alien to everyone on your crew. And what
Mhm.
may be good for him may not be good for your people,
And vice
and
versa.
yeah, and vice versa. I mean, I guess it's okay in the tangential sense that he can point out things that he eats, and
Right.
hopefully at least you can scan it and see. But I wouldn't just blindly take his advice on stuff.
Especially because the way he describes the pain of eating this certain apple was way too specific to be real. Like,
And they just took his word for it. Like they didn't at
yeah,
least like take a sample and take it to the doctor
yeah,
and see
they
like,
didn't.
is this guy legit on
Yeah,
this or what? They were just like, nope. Neelix says it's poisonous. Meanwhile, he feeds them this root, Leola root, which will become a recurring theme, by the way.
mm.
And it seems to be awful. And it's like, oh yeah, lots of vitamin and minerals here. I don't care. It clearly tastes like
Turn
hot
it
garbage.
into a powder and like add it as a powder later or something. But yeah, don't include it as a vegetable.
So there's that's going on the ship. Tuvok and Tom are just at their stations. Tom notices something weird. They initiate a scan. They find out that there's a ship that's shadowing them, and it's of Kazon configuration. They immediately begin the roundup of the people on the planet. Let's start beaming everybody up with what we've got, because we don't know what these Kazon may be up to. And they've lost contact with Seska. She apparently wandered into some caves, and it's possible that the signal from the away team is being blocked.
Right.
Chakotay goes off to find her. He does find her, but he also finds Kazon snooping around in these caves. Seska almost shoots him. They beat a hasty exit. They make it back to the ship. It's important to note, in these caves, she found several mushrooms, which she wanted to make into a soup for Chakotay. Again, you don't know if this stuff is truly edible. You're just taking it. I'm sure
Yeah,
you did a tricorder
mushrooms.
scan, right? But I mean, you just we'll get into that anyway. They make it back to the ship, and that's the next scene that we see is her bringing soup to Chakotay's quarters. She makes this soup that he really likes, and from their time spent together when they were Maquis officers, she knows how to make soup that he likes. So she makes it. She begins to tell him the story of how she got to make the soup, which involved her and several other Maquis, former Maquis, basically
Waiting.
tricking Neelix into being distracted long enough for her to steal the stores and make the soup. Neelix, of course, reports this. Chakotay gets upset and it's pretty much like, everybody's on punishment, including me, even because I ate this stuff, even, however unknowingly. Seska intimates that they were intimate and would like to be intimate again. And he's like, yeah, we already decided a long time ago this wouldn't work. And
Right.
now that we're a part of this crew, it really wouldn't work. So no. And Seska leaves.
Goes look for Instant Kim.
Oh, yeah. Because that would be a pairing.
Yeah.
So, of course, the ship continues on. They receive a distress call from another ship. They pull up on the ship, and it's another Kazon ship. There's been some kind of explosion on the ship. everybody on the ship except for one guy is dead. They get the guy over to the ship, over to Voyager, and they're running their scans on the guy, and he's like, I don't know, he's dying of some kind of weird metal blood poisoning, and they're trying to figure that whole situation out. They go to the ship. The reason for the explosion is whatever this weird alien technology is. B'Elanna does a scan and realizes this is Federation technology. How did the Kazon get their hands on Federation technology? Chakotay, Janeway, and Tuvok are in the turbo lift talking about it, and Tuvok is like, well, there's only three possibilities. Either A, another Federation ship also came to the Delta Quadrant and interacted with these people and gave them some technology. B,
someone invented it somehow
someone,
themselves.
they somehow magically they invented the same thing. Or C, someone from the Voyager gave it to him.
Right.
Janeway's all, I don't like that, but he's like, hate it for you. I mean, that's it. Those are the only options, you know. So now they begin their investigation to figure out who did what. They want to get their hands on the technology on the ship, but it's surrounded by this nucleonic radiation, which makes beaming out impossible, which, again, is something I have a problem with. And we're going to discuss that, too. So they got to wait. Janeway's like, how long will it take? B'Elanna's like, it'll take us until tomorrow. Janeway's like, nope. I want it by the end of the day. B'Elanna's like, I don't do that. I don't over exaggerate. If I say tomorrow, I mean tomorrow. And so Janeway's like, well, okay, you know, first time I've ever seen a captain back down, you know, she meant tomorrow. Okay. James T. Kirk, that never would have stood on his ship.
I was gonna say, who's the engineer on the original show?
Scotty.
Scotty. His whole bit was the
Scotty
waited 3 hours.
Yeah,
you told me to, Captain.
That's even a famous bit. He's like, it will take an hour to do whatever, and he's like, Scotty, you've got 30 minutes. He's like, I can't rewrite the laws of physics, Captain. and Kirk says, what did I say? And then Scotty's like, I don't know how, but I figured it out. I did it. I did it. Yeah. Anyway, Kirk's the kind that said, oh, I'm sorry. Did I say end of the day? I meant 10 hours. Now what? Now what? You know, anyway.
Yeah.
So they come up with, again, they've got their plan in place. They're going to go and get the thing tomorrow. But Seska decides she is not going to wait. And so she has a plan that she thinks will work to get the access to the technology. She beams over, tries to access it. It blows up in her face. She gets it transported back to the ship, which again doesn't make sense because when they realize that she's gone, they try to beam her out. And Janeway says, we can't beam her out. She's messing around with whatever subspace, and if we try to beam her out now, she might die. But then the explosion happens, they're like, emergency beam out. So it's like, did y'all just forget what the captain said?
Yeah.
So, but whatever, it works. The thing is, it works. They get her back to the ship. They treat her for what's happened to her and everything else. And then the doctor, you know, while he's also treating her, he's treating the Kazon that was also sick, and the Kazon needs blood transfusions. Right. They try to find compatible individuals in the crew. They find a couple, but they also realize they never got a blood sample from Seska. They asked Seska about this. She's like, I just never got around to it, whatever.
And this is before she beamed over, to be clear.
Before she beamed over, right. But now they've got her unconscious in sick bay. They're like, well, we're going to take the opportunity. We're going to do it anyway. And they do. The Kazon, who sent out the emergency signal, that gets picked up by another group of Kazon who show up, and they're led by this really tall Kazon named Maj Kulla. And Kulla's like, we want to see our survivor. And so, of course, Janeway brings said survivor, or Maj Kulla, over to the survivor. And they're like, yeah, he's still unconscious. He can't tell you anything, but at least you can see he's alive. We saved him. Well, Kulla's like, I'll fix that. And he nods to his man, and they stab him in the neck with a needle, and boom. Yeah. He's dead. She now kicks Kulla off of the ship. While they're kicking them off, the doctor and Kes meet with Janeway, and they're like, hey, we were doing this scan of Seska, you know, because I needed that blood for that guy before they, you know, offed him. Yeah. And we realized there were some peculiarities about her. And yeah, she's not Bajoran. She's Cardassian. And they're like, what? You know, mind blown. And so, you know, they tell everybody, or tell at least Chakotay this, and I'm assuming Tuvok, because we find out later on that he knows, but this is not the point. Chakotay goes and talks to Seska, and she's like, "Well, no, duh, you think that I'm a Cardassian? I had a rare blood disease, and I was saved by this Cardassian woman who gave me a bone marrow transplant, and now I have all these Cardassian markers in my blood." And Chakotay believes it, and then goes and tells everybody. And but they also like laid the seeds of dissent in her brain, right? And they're just like, we're gonna figure it out how they got this technology, so forth and so on. So now they're watching, monitoring, waiting, see who's going to take the bait to do whatever it is. Because they also had interviewed another officer, Carey,
Mhm.
Lieutenant Carey. Will remember who earlier was next in line to be the chief engineer, but he was passed over by B'Elanna. And so basically,
Mhm.
they were wondering if he was perhaps holding a grudge and was sharing technology. So it's
Right.
between him and Seska as to which one of them is the saboteur, the thief. So they're monitoring, and it looks like Carey is inputting information to make it look like Seska is the um, responsible party, is the real thief here. So B'Elanna falls for it, but Chakotay and Tuvok don't. And so they go and confront her laying in sick bay, and they're like, "Yeah, we saw that it was your code, and we know that you were trying to make it look like it was Carey, but we know it was you. And we traced your signal, how you're manipulating everything all over the place. But of course, Tuvok figures it out, and it was here. It was
Yeah.
from this console, so we know it was you."
Right.
And then she's like, "Fine, yes, it was me. You caught me. I am secretly a Cardassian.
Cardassian and
And if we had been doing this by Cardassian rules, we'd be home by now. This is all Janeway's fault. She's
yeah.
a terrible captain, and we've got to make better decisions, better choices, and stop letting this woman lead us around by our noses here and ruin everything. We need
Right.
allies like the Kazon." They're like, "Yeah, no, and we're going to throw you in the brig." And she's like, "Yeah, except you're not."
Right.
And somehow she has set up an emergency transport which beams her off the ship and onto a waiting Kazon vessel where she is spirited away. And then, of course, everybody is like, "Well, now we know that Seska's, garbage, and we've got to be vigilant."
Right.
And then the episode ends with Tuvok and Chakotay sharing a moment where Tuvok's like, or Chakotay's like, "Well, I'm glad that Seska was able to fool both of us. Misery loves company," something
Right.
like that to the effect he says. Episode ends.
Yeah.
Um, Chakotay is highly problematic in this entire episode. Um, and I'm going to stop there while I ask you, of course, what did you think of this episode?
Yeah, I liked it. I would say this is the best episode so far, and I've said that maybe a time or two. I said for Phage, that was probably a good one because it ended with Janeway having to make a really important decision about what to do about the situation. Then we had what was it? No, was it Ex Post Fact? No, I'm trying. I have the one where the Romulan captain, the Eye of the Needle,
I
or
have to
the
be, yeah,
Romulan captain. That one was interesting. But this one, like, it was a mystery. It was a
yeah.
mystery plot, and so it was a
It was an
not quite
internal
a
mystery too, not
yeah,
weird aliens outside of our crew doing things. It was all inside, all the ship
right,
people, yeah. Great
yeah,
stuff when you can get those kind of implications going. But go ahead.
right, yeah. So it's and the thing about mystery stories is that you're constantly trying. Like, I love Agatha Christie books. I've mentioned reading them several times. Everything about a mystery, not a book like an Agatha Christie mystery. This is kind of the same thing. You're constantly throwing out red herrings. You're constantly throwing out evidence that points in one direction. But a lot of times that usually turns into, well, it happens either of two ways. You had two options in this plot. You had Lieutenant Carey as the guy who was originally passed over to become the chief engineer. Um, is he's truly holding a grudge? Has he been, basically building up a his own sort of like as he been internally holding on to a grudge this whole time? Meanwhile, we have Seska here, who has openly been rebellious, has been trying to get other people to do things that they shouldn't. In the last episode, Prime Factors, like, she was kind of the leading voice about trying to get the technology that would allow them to jump very, very far ahead. And of course, other characters like Carrie and Torres got on board, but it really felt like Seska was the one like kind of driving the group to do that. So she's already been an interesting character. She's already been driving a lot of plot so far. So for the plot to be like, is it Seska? I mean, all the evidence points to Seska, but in a good mystery novel, that is then turned on its head, and that's how it ends. That's how it almost ends, because we see that her login information is the one that supposedly is proof that someone else is trying to frame her. She pretends that someone's trying to frame her, which is great. So she is a pretty brilliant deceiver. I mean, that's what Chakotay says to Tuvok at the end, is like, she deceived both of us, right? And Tuvok's like, yeah, she did. So I like, basically, this character has proven to be better and better every time she comes on. So to find out that she's gone now, it's like, bummer. But I do know, because I clicked on the actress who plays the character, that she's going to come back.
Hackett.
So she's not gone for good. She's definitely a Michael Eddington kind of character. We'll see more of her. Another Maquis type character. But it's funny that this episode happened. It aired in 95, right? 1995, and then the episode from Deep Space Nine that is kind of referenced here, Second Skin, October of 1994. So basically, and for those who don't remember, Second Skin is the episode where Kira is, well, it turns out she was kidnapped, but the idea of that episode is that they try to convince her that she's actually a Cardassian who was a secret agent who was given a Bajoran, facelifts like we know they do, and made to look like a Bajoran, and she was actually the daughter of whatever that guy's name was. Turns out
Gamor.
Yeah, it turns out that whole thing was actually trying to get Gamor. It was a honeypot operation using Kira, because it turns out, no, Kira is Kira. She's not some secret Cardassian, but basically turned the plot on its head from Second Skin now to State of Flux. It turns out that Seska is a Cardassian masquerading as a Bajoran, and I always wondered why she didn't have the earring. And that should have given it away the whole time. That no Bajoran wouldn't have her earring, so she was always a traitor. She was always not a Bajoran. Yeah, it's like I should have realized. But yeah, what you have a lot of things to say about Chakotay, it sounds like.
I do. Chakotay is, like I said, Chakotay is stupid. He allows Seska to manipulate him pretty much from the get-go in this episode. He when he goes to look for her, when she's hiding out in the caves, right? When he goes to look for her and finds her in close proximity to these Kazon, he doesn't even stop to question it, ask if she's run into them, or exchange any fire with them, nothing. It's just, okay, let's go. And then they don't question her when they get back to the ship. Also, when they recognize that there is reason to suspect her, and even Tuvok says you should regard her with caution. The very next thing they talk about, they're down in engineering, and they're putting together their plan, and then B'Elanna starts to assign her team. She calls out 3 people, and one of them is Seska. And Chakotay stops her, and he's like, "No, I want Seska to monitor these operations from the bridge."
Right.
And so then, Seska chases him down in the hallway, and she's like, "What's going on?" And he then proceeds to tell her, "Everybody's really suspicious of you, and Tuvok is investigating you. So I'm keeping you close to keep you out of the fire. Just do your job well. Don't mess up, and Tuvok won't have a reason to suspect you." But him truly not knowing whether or not she is innocent, he's basically giving out the whole senior staff playbook to a person they suspect. He should have just told her, truly he was trying to look out for her, he just should have said, "Hey, I'm the first officer, you're the ensign. At the end of the day, you follow orders. I want you on the bridge, you're on the bridge."
Right. He didn't have to make any sort of...
He didn't have to justify anything to her, and yet by doing so, he sets up
The whole plot.
Basically everything else that follows. And it was just such a ridiculous thing for him to do. Also, part of their plan, and like the reason that they're having all these issues, right, is the technology on the Kazon ship is surrounded by this nucleonic radiation. They can't get access to it, so they have to wait for the radiation to dissipate. Carrie's plan is to use force fields to move the radiation out of the way, which is also a callback to a DS9 episode. It's the one Rejoined, as a matter of fact, when Dax's former lover in a new body comes to the station, and there's that accident in engineering, and Dax makes the force field to protect her from the radiation, and she walks over the force field to get to Dr. Khan to save her. It's the same thing. We're going to set up a force field to block the radiation long enough for us to get to what we want to get to.
Right.
Same deal. So great that you guys have remembered how some of your technology works, but the whole time I'm screaming in my head, do shuttles not exist? Have y'all forgotten about shuttlecraft entirely? You can't beam the thing out, but y'all were just over there.
Yeah.
Why can't you just take a shuttle, fly over there, open the hatch, and then walk in your hazard suits, pick up the technology, and bring it out?
Right.
It might take you a little bit longer, but you wouldn't be waiting a day to go and get it. It would take you a couple hours. Just drive over, get it, and come back. And the radiation, I mean, you're in your suit, so you could just open the hatch and let the radiation drift out into the vacuum of space. It's not going to hurt anything out there. It's space.
Yeah.
It's vast.
Right.
That's the whole point. And that's the other part of it too. Like you said, no one else survived on the ship, right? That's what they said. There was only one survivor. You've already beamed that survivor over to Voyager. Okay, open the hatch. Let that stuff get sucked out into space or blown out into space as it should be. I don't understand why none of these things were done. So just like, in the future, do y'all just forget what technology you have? Like, they just keep talking about all the unique technologies, but they're stopped by the most conventional things, and no one thinks of relatable workarounds beyond things that are going to take you even more time. The shuttle is the obvious answer to, I can't beam this. You can't beam it out, but you can go get it. So go get it.
Right.
And you could have done that long before the Kazon showed up. And that was part of your problem, was having to wait. And then they had to rush B'Elanna. They were like, these Kazon, they're coming, and we want to be out of the way before they really, show up and get going. Now, kudos to B'Elanna here for being remarkably efficient in her plan. Like, again, she told Janeway it would take until tomorrow, and she was spot on. She gets it done, and Janeway calls down and she's like, "Are y'all ready?" And she's like, "Yep, we've run our final simulations. We're ready to go." They beam over. Janeway has some more tense words with Cullen, and then she's back on with the away team. She's like, "I don't want to rush you," but and B'Elanna's like, "Oh, we're done. I was right, basically, and y'all can suck it. We're on our way back. We already got everything. We're done." So great engineering on her part. I will definitely give her her props for that. But like Chakotay, again, like he's so hell-bent on making Carrie the scapegoat that he avoids all the obvious pointers to Seska. He's the only voice who's like, it couldn't have possibly been her. She almost shot me thinking I was a Kazon.
Right.
Did she really? Or was she just playing a part, And then, the whole thing about her having the Orchid's disease, which was a miraculous savior by a Cardassian woman. What? A Cardassian saved a Bajoran child? Why? Just because she took pity on you? Like, why would she take pity on you?
The occupation forces?
Yeah, there's not enough here that gives credibility to anything that Seska is saying, and he's just eating it up like he was eating that awful mushroom soup, and he likes mushroom soup. Like, everything about this guy in this episode, just like I don't like how they're trying to portray him as this suddenly soft-hearted guy who just wants to believe overwhelmingly in the goodness of his crew, and especially the Maquis members, and in particular the one that he clearly has a romantic entanglement with, and it just makes him seem like such a dupe because in every step of the way, she is manipulating him and he refuses to see it. Everyone points out, he gets mad at Tuvok because Tuvok, on a couple of occasions, points out to him that this looks more like Seska, not Carrie. And he's
Right.
ready to almost, get in Tuvok's face about it. And it's like, you need to take a step back and be an objective first officer here. You
Right.
have two officers who are under suspicion. Why are you not advocating just as hard for Carrie?
Well, so I guess to back up Chakotay a bit here, which by the way, this is the first episode that's focused on him. Like
Yeah,
is episode 10. This is the first episode that really is about him. And I mean, gosh, Seska. I mean, it was almost her episode in a lot of ways. But
yeah.
which is why I'm glad her character will be coming back because I think the actress is doing a great job with her, and I'm almost sad that this plot line happened so quick. Like part of me wishes like she was more Michael Eddington and that she had stuck around a little bit,
Uh,
being being a bit of a negative Nancy kind of voice, being the rebel before she pulls this. But it almost is the right time for it because she's been a rebel enough that to turn if she had just kept being a rebel, it would have been just repetitive plot lines for her. So the fact that she's been. I mean, the Kazon were the aliens from the very first episode. These homeless looking fools, like I think they look terrible. They're not a very good design, in my opinion. But anyway, the fact that she has somehow kept in contact with them to the point where she has been able to communicate replicator technology, which I love the speech that she and Janeway have when she's like, it's just replicator technology. This is nothing to us. And Janeway's like, that could turn the balance of power in this quadrant. We're not here to mess with things. She doesn't say the prime directive, but what she's implying. And she's like, we got to get home. Like, what are you talking about? We need friends. We need allies. Now, there is kind of a plot hole in that we don't know exactly how her giving replicator technology necessarily makes it so that the Kazon are going to give Voyager like protection per se. It's a little
so,
unclear
well,
how.
it's basically implied that she's trying to establish a partnership with them so that because despite technology, the Kazon vastly outnumber Voyager, obviously. And so
Right,
by having a powerful ally, it will make their transition through the space easier because they will have someone with numbers who can back them up while they're working their way through the space. And the only way to do that is to basically sell off the one thing that Voyager has that everybody wants, which is their technology. And you could just almost to support Seska here, can't believe I'm doing that. Um, Giving them the food replicator is probably the easiest thing considering what we know of the Kazon so far and that they all are suffering from some kind of food shortage, water shortage. We saw in the very first episode how important water was to that first group of Kazon that we saw on Kessa's planet. So yeah, a food replicator could solve a lot of problems for them. But Janeway is also correct in that by solving those kinds of problems, you shift the balance of power. All of the Kazon are struggling
right,
in one way or another, and if you suddenly take care of all the struggles of one group, you allow them a step up over all the rest,
exactly.
and that would upset the balance of power that has existed in this area that they are not familiar with. They don't
Right,
know the rest of the dynamic of the area, and them upsetting it, however temporarily, is wrong. And
right,
she's right.
right. Yeah, no, it's I just love the dynamic because when they figure out that this was just a replicator, like that's all that it was that they were trying. The technology, like I'll put it this way: when they go on the ship and they see how badly things went, like these people were melted into the ship somehow, like
Mhm.
their bodies and the ship are somehow intermingled. Like like it's a horrible destructive act, and it was just a replicator malfunction. They didn't like buffer the coils right. Is
Yeah,
what
she said there was
or
some casing. There was a casing they should have used.
yeah,
They didn't
like
use it, and they didn't use a thick enough one. If they
right,
had done it right, which just speaks to their level of inexperience with the
exactly,
technology as well, which is another problem that Seska should have also been keen to help them avoid. They don't have the experience to use the technology that she's giving them,
Right.
and that in and of itself could also upset the balance of power. Say she gives it again the replicator or whatever. Say they tried to make one of those on a mass scale on a planet somewhere and had the same issue.
Right.
Besides blowing up a ship, they could have decimated an entire population,
Right.
because they don't have the experience, they don't have the technology or the expertise to do such a thing. But their greed would make them try, and then it could cause devastation in that regard. So Janeway is still right in why they, relegate their technology the way that they do. So yeah, Seska is still very much wrong here, and she's just speaking from a very typical Cardassian standpoint of what I want is the right thing. Screw everyone else.
Right. Yeah. It's yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Exactly.
Now, so now it's important to note that these are not the same Kazon that we saw in the first episode. This is the first time that we've seen a differentiation of the Kazon, and we now
Right.
know that there are different sects. The
Oh, that's
first group
right. They
that
did mention that.
yes,
Yes.
the first group that we encountered in the very first episode, Caretaker, they are called the Kazon Ogla. Okay, so they are again different group entirely than these Kazon who are known as the Kazon Nistrum. There are several different Kazon sects. We will get introduced to them throughout the run of the first and I think second season. And I think there's like 7, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't look it up beforehand to know, but I think that's right. There's 6 or 7 different distinct groups of Kazon. Now, there, like I said, there's an episode where we get to see all of the leaders from the main sects come together, and they are all variations on this theme. It's very interesting. If you look at the Kazon, you pull them up, they all, obviously because they're the same species, they will share a similar look, but then because of their different, denominations, they're going to their hair is different, clothing is different, things like that. Only reason why I bring that up is because it's so rare in Trek for them to differentiate a species. A lot of times they just make them all homogenous. Like look at the Romulans. Every time you ever saw the Romulans, they were all dressed the same. Klingons for a long time were that way. They all look the same, dress the same, sound the same. You know, all of
Hmm.
that kind of stuff. So I like it when they take the time to show clear differences, distinctions within a
Yeah,
race.
that's a good point. Speaking of which, I don't. We only had very limited examples of female Cardassians. I mean, we had them. It's like they weren't. They
Yeah.
didn't exist, but they were very few and far between. We had that season 2 episode where that like school teach like professor woman had some students that were
Fatima
trying to.
Lang. Yes,
Yeah,
she came on and she was Quark's ex girlfriend.
right. But I
And so we
can't.
saw her.
And then I guess the only other episode I can think of where they had female Cardassians were the one where O'Brien was on trial um, on Cardassia Prime, and
Tribunal.
they had abducted the poor bastard.
Yeah.
You're guilty before you're guilty, and you're not proven innocent. You
We just
just
explain why you're guilty. And
exactly, yeah,
that's
yeah,
it.
yeah.
But there was another episode as well that was I believe it was called Tears of the Prophet, and that's where they're the 3 Cardassian scientists come to the ship, and they're all
Okay,
women, and they are working to establish a subspace relay that will allow communication through the wormhole. And
okay,
Cisco leads the expedition into the wormhole.
right,
And at first, it's only 2 scientists, but then the third one shows up, and it turns out that the third one is really working with the Obsidian Order, and she was sent there specifically to sabotage the mission. But they, of course, the other 2 scientists find her out or reveal her true nature to Cisco and company. And there's the comet that, if it comes into contact with the wormhole, will cause the wormhole to destabilize.
right,
But Cisco is able to wrap a force field around the comet fragments to guide it through the
right.
wormhole. And yeah, there's a whole prophecy about it, sort of stars
And like it
peering through
stays
the
open,
gates.
right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
And it leaves that trail of selenium deposits in the wormhole, which allows the wormhole to stay open just a crack just enough for the signals to come through. So
Right.
it works.
Yeah.
It works. And one of those scientists actually, has quite the fondness for O'Brien and offers to mate with him at the end.
I have to
And
say the details of the female Cardassian scientists are not what I remember the Cisco, like the prophecy bit, but I don't remember the rest of that. I'll have to go back and revisit that episode.
yeah, their whole thing, her and O'Brien, because they're fighting the whole time, but she takes O'Brien's fighting as a human mating ritual and becomes quite infatuated with him. And he's like, no, I'm married.
Thank
I'm
you.
fighting with you because I really don't like you. So
yeah. Me and my wife argue plenty. Thank you.
Yeah.
Keiko is lovely, but they definitely have their arguments. Yeah. But yeah, this Seska is just you love a good villain. You love a good
Martha Hackett, who plays Seska, does that character well. She does that kind of she makes you believe in the plight of the villain that she plays. Like you said, she makes a very convincing argument as to why she did what she did. And I mean, it's not hard to say. I mean, I can see your point. Now, when you are dedicated to a different sort of values and principles like Janeway, it's easy to see to say that what she did was wrong because it's a betrayal of those principles, but it's not necessarily a betrayal in the sense of she was doing it for to enrich herself or for her own greed. Her whole point is to get everyone home faster. She's in a sense trying to save more lives.
Yeah. Well, and it's just curious too because she was a part of the Maquis. So if we start with the idea that the Maquis were not allies of the Federation to begin with, and then it turns out she's a Cardassian. So she's 2 levels removed from any sort of justification for Janeway's action in terms of Starfleet policy. That's what she says. Like, if this had been a Cardassian ship, we would have been home already. Like, we wouldn't have done all that nonsense back there to save the caretaker, and we would have used the technology that he had to beam us back to the Alpha Quadrant. No questions asked. Which is just a great point. It's like this whole situation is a Federation ship captain problem because she has principles, she has she has orders, the reasons to do what she did. Janeway, that is, which is why we love the Federation and we love Star Trek.
Right.
But it's the same thing that got us to the situation. So we can, and you're right, she doesn't do it to necessarily enrich or to enrich herself. She's not selfish in that manner, but we can see that she at least is the type of deceptive person that, I mean, if that is the reason, that could be it. I mean, she had secretly planned this. She had a beam out code ready to go. I mean, she really had taken plans to make this happen, and that's why I like this episode, because you were complaining about Chakotay. I would argue, first off, he probably feels a lot. He needs to protect, his Maquis officers and people. They're an integrated crew. He's the only person. Well, he's the most senior person, so he has to protect them as a part of the integrated crew. So she's one of his people. So at the very least, not only is she his former lover, but she's one of his people. I mean, he took the punishment that the 2-day you can't use replicators on the ship. He took that for himself too. He's like, I'm going to punish myself with that. So when you say like you were like, Chakotay's an idiot, I understand your point. Again, all the evidence points to her, and he's the one being like, really? And the only reason I, as an audience member, was on his side was because I was thinking this was going to be an Agatha Christie style. Whoops! It actually was Lieutenant Casey all along, or Carey, excuse me, Lieutenant Carey all along. That's what I thought maybe might happen. I think for me, I was willing to go along with maybe Seska isn't quite as evil as all of the evidence is pointing toward. Maybe there is some sort of frame job going on. But I love the fact that in the end, that's not it. No, she's the one. All of that framing evidence, all of the evidence pointed to her the whole time because it was her. Only
Well,
someone who watches and reads books and plays, only someone like myself could get suckered by the, well, maybe. No,
well,
all the evidence pointed to her. Of course it was her.
yeah, all the evidence the entire time points to her.
Right,
And I mean, like you said, yeah, if you want to just give yourself the suspension of, disbelief, whatever, and you want to, really immerse yourself in the story, it's just like, again, from one of the great things about Voyager is, especially in these early days, you get these perspectives of, like you said, Maquis versus Federation. And so
hmm,
you have this Maquis officer, Chakotay, who is trying to make sure that the crews are properly integrated, but he's also, having to go the extra mile to stick up for his people and make sure they're getting adequate representation and getting a fair shake at everything, because there's not that many of them. Like, even though the crews are blended, there are still more Federation personnel than there are Maquis personnel. So,
right,
trying to make sure they get, a fair go of things, I understand. But at the same time, the whole reason that Janeway selects him to be her first officer is not just because he's the captain of the Maquis, but as she says, he's also, command level qualified. He's a
right,
Starfleet Academy graduate, so he
hmm,
knows how Starfleet works. He served in Starfleet for a few years before he resigned his commission and
right,
went off. So him being thrust back into Starfleet and having to deal with Vulcans and Tellarites and Bolians and humans who believe as Janeway does shouldn't be that much of a stretch for him. So the reason why I keep saying that Chakotay is stupid is because, in particular, Tuvok keeps pointing out to him over and over again that most of the evidence is leaning towards Seska, and he doesn't necessarily do anything to refute the evidence. He just gets mad at Tuvok, and of
right.
all people to not get mad at,
Yeah,
Tuvok,
yeah.
it doesn't make any sense. Tuvok has no.
He's a freaking, yeah. He's a Vulcan.
He's a Vulcan. He's holding no grudges here. He's
Right,
not looking at the Maquis and giving them, or giving the Starfleet officers preferential treatment or anything like that. He's investigating Carrie just as much as he's investigating Seska. It
right,
just turns out that most of the evidence is pointing to Seska. And
right,
he's saying, hey, and again, he's not even telling Chakotay not to, advocate for Seska. He's just saying, be careful.
right.
And every time that he points that out, Tuvok, or not Tuvok, but Chakotay is ready to jump down his throat. We
Yeah,
see him on the bridge when Seska violates the captain's orders and takes it upon herself to go and beam over and try to get the equipment. And Tuvok says it's possible she's gone over there to destroy evidence which may be able to which may implicate her. That's what he
right.
says.
Yeah,
And Chakotay immediately turns and he's like, "Can't you see that she's trying to prove herself?"
right.
No, what he said makes sense. Both
Yeah,
things could be true, Chakotay. How
right.
about, for the sake of everyone involved, you get your ex-girlfriend to calm down, bring her ass back to the ship, and let us follow through on our plan, not go over there and further implicate herself by potentially destroying evidence.
Well, you know what's
That-
funny about that? As you say that, at the moment, I don't remember quite the order of scenes to know exactly when this scene happened, but there is the scene where they get Lieutenant Carey in, I guess it's Janeway's ready room or something, but
yes, they're in Janeway's ready room.
and they grill him and they
Yeah.
say you have to be, you have to stay in quarters until we figure this
Yeah,
out.
they
But
put
they
him on
never,
lockdown.
yeah, but they
She said,
don't.
we're going to restrict you to, she tells him, we're going to restrict you to quarters. While the investigation goes on,
There's
we're
no
taking
scene
you
like
off
that.
duty and
Yeah,
we're restricting you to quarters.
and there's no scene like that with Seska, and there's no evidence that she was restricted to quarters. Yeah, so I'm totally with you on the idea that to make Chakotay looks dumb. He fumbles a lot. I'll just say for me, because this was the first episode where he was the focus, and because the overall mystery was interesting and had
Yeah.
a good, like the fact that again it was a replicator that was the technology, again something that to us seems so unremarkable by this point. Of course they have replicators on the Starfleet ship. Who, if you want a replicator, this is the thing we send our people off with is replicators. Yeah, everyone needs a replicator. Have
You
replicator.
get a
Yeah,
replicator, and you get a replicator, and
yeah.
we've got
And now
replicators in all of our shuttles. We don't need this one. We got plenty of extras.
exactly, and the fact that the Kazon is like you and your unique technology make you feel brave, Captain Janeway, but you don't really, we have ships on the way. Like the Star Trek of it was great. The again the B'Elanna Torres is like, I don't do the whole Scotty thing about messing with my estimation of when I could do something. I tell you what I can do, and I do it in that time frame. I like the end of the episode where Tuvok is explaining like his principles, like Chakotay's mad about, oh, it's easy for you to be the way you are, and he's like, no, it's not. Like I have to like work through my own things. You operate on instinct, but that's not how we Vulcans do things. We have a different way of. Characters were revealed in this episode,
Yes.
including Chakotay as the number one character, but it was a revelation of character all the way around, and that's what makes this episode great. Yeah, that's it. We revealed characters, even small bits of character throughout the episode. That's what I want from a plot.
And for one that was so focused on Chakotay and Seska, you're right. We get a lot of character development from a lot of other characters. I mean, Carrie gets a bit to shine.
Yeah.
B'Elanna, obviously Janeway with her speech and how dedicated she is to her, her principles and to the guiding tenets she's using to get the crew home.
Right.
Tuvok and how he views everything and how he processes everything and how he has to work through things without emotion and so forth. All of these things are laid out there for us to see of these characters that we haven't really had the opportunity to sit with for very long. So it is a great episode for exposing these things about these characters. I just think that it's for as much as it reveals about Chakotay, it's also kind of a bad episode for Chakotay because it makes him seem so simple. And
I guess for me, sorry to interrupt, but for me, if he continues to have this problem, then that will be evidence that he has a flaw, and that's a terminal flaw for his character. But if he grows from this episode, he doesn't fall for this type of thing again. He isn't so, I don't know if the word trusting is quite the word we want, but he isn't so naive, I guess is the proper word. Then I would say, okay, this is a one-off for him. So obviously how the plot goes. I don't, but that's the thing we'll have to watch for from what I'll be looking for.
And I'm not gonna tell you, but yeah, no. I mean, it's just one of those things I always have a problem with when you get these characters and you're especially trying to establish certain things about them early on. Sometimes I feel like you can overplay your hand a bit, and it makes your characters seem either tougher or weaker than they really need to be, and then you have to spend the next however long walking some of this back, and that can be a lot harder than ramping up over time. And so that is always my concern when they kind of lay into this, oh, I was tricked, I was duped, I was whatever. I mean, sure, we can all be tricked and everything else, but one of the things about Star Trek that so many people enjoy, especially back in its heyday with episodes like this, was we were always dealing with very competent officers.
Right.
And Chakotay doesn't really exemplify that here when he doesn't maintain his objectivity, when he details points of the investigation to one of the main suspects. He doesn't put the suspect under the same type of scrutiny and lockdown that he does another potential suspect. And it's just there's so many like little missteps like that it's just like why wouldn't you take those steps? And then overall with the episode is it just seems like a fundamental forgetting of the unique technologies that we keep hearing about over and over again. They don't use the shuttles. The transporter can't work, but then magically works.
Yeah,
in almost like the same scene.
Yeah, I didn't notice that when I was watching it, but you talking about it made me definitely go, oh right, yeah.
Stuff like that. I'm just saying it's things like that it's just like it's clear that you guys were. I mean, you're trying to tell a story. I get it, but you're playing fast and loose with the rules that you established, and they're not even like the larger overarching canon rules that govern all of Trek up to this point. It's rules you established within this very episode, and then you fudged on them. So what was the point?
Yeah. It was funny. I was watching it tonight, obviously, while I was eating some dinner, and for some reason the ads, when the ads come up, they don't come up right at the right moment.
The brakes are not synced. Right. They're on a timer. They're definitely on a timer, not according to the breaks as they were originally programmed into the episode.
Right. Well, I swear I was so mad because there's the revelation that Sheska's blood is not Bajoran, and so the doctor is saying she's not Bajoran. She's a ad commercial. I was like, she's a what? What is she? Like the worst cliffhanger. I was like, did y'all do that on purpose? Like, she's a ad? No, it turns out, and then here's what's so annoying is the ads like had some sort of glitch, so I had to reload the page, and I had to go. I had to do that again. And so she's a ad. I was like, you sons of guns, you need to sync up your ads to the correct moment because at the end of I finally got to the ads, Cardassian ad break, the what should have been the ad break. And then oh man, I was so frustrated. I was like, she's a what? I had no idea. She's a Cardassian. So yeah, just the twists and turns of this episode were great. Yes, Chakotay's kind of a dummy, but I've already said it. He's a dummy because he's a little too naive here at this point. But if he's not naive in the future, if he turns out to be a little more hardcore, and lets Tuvok do his job basically, then we're good to go. So,
and that's another thing too. Like, yeah, it's clear that he's holding a grudge against Tuvok for being, a spy and all the other kind of stuff. But by this point, and then being forced back together to work or whatever, he needs to get over it. He just needs to get over it. And it's like you've made it a point to accept literally everyone else, and yet for some reason you're giving Tuvok the hardest time. And is it because he's a Vulcan and he's not going to respond to you emotionally, so you're just going to hurl all this at him until you're tired, or what? But it's just like the man was doing the job. If when you were a Federation officer, that this is something they would have been doing.
right.
He didn't harm you. He didn't like set you up for failure or death or whatever. He was there to get information.
Right.
And now y'all are working together. So suck it up.
Right.
Um, yeah, I don't like those moments, and I don't know if it's just because I've I like the character of Tuvok, so maybe I'm a little bit more,
Bias
whatever.
in this direction.
But but at the same time, it's just um, even, I said that for other characters too. Like they give the Doctor a hard time early on in the episode, and people not treating him. He's a piece of technology or whatever. But it's just like, okay, but you have to interact with him, and this is the person or the thing that's trying to save your life. So, and considering how long you all learned to interact with holographic technology, would it be that hard for you to, be courteous to the thing that's trying to save your life? Why not? Like, I don't understand those kind of that level of indifference or animosity that's leveled towards certain things. Maybe it's just because we're not in that level of our own development, right? We haven't had holograms that walk and talk and interact and can learn and grow and whatever else for a couple of centuries. So who knows how we'll feel about stuff like that when that time comes. But yeah, just like things like that just always kind of stand out to me. It's like, okay, just he was doing a job. Get over it.
Right.
Get over it already. Be the professional that you are claiming to be when you say you're going to be the first officer, and stop openly showing hostility and animosity towards the one person on the ship whose entire job is to maintain and enforce order and the captain's directive.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But he's part of the Marquis, man. He's got.
The way they want them to maintain their edge sometimes is confusing, because it's like, so many times we'll see them just go along to get along, and then it's out of nowhere they'll pop up and be, asshats, and I'm just like, makes no sense. Anything else you want to say about this episode? Final thoughts, standout performances, anything that surprised you in this one besides Seska's obvious betrayal?
Yeah, I mean, on Martha Hackett as Seska, it was great. I guess that's the other part of the episode why I liked it, is her acting was great. Like, she was able to play the offended rebellious, innocent, because she's pretending to be innocent character really well. She's got an edge to her. Like, she's an attractive actress, but she's got those, I don't know what the word, but I'm gonna call it imperious eyebrows. Those, like, someone who looks like they're just
Very
always
sharp.
scowling.
Yeah.
She's got so she's got an edge to her as both the actress and the character that just worked. She did a great job. I just liked her whole bit, so I'm glad that the character is not gone. We'll see more of her. I liked the revelation of character. I'm glad that Paris and Kim were not the focus. I'm not really a big fan of those characters. I think Kim is this. They're presenting him as. I mean, he's basically, he's
Wesley.
Wesley. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. He's basically Wesley Crusher. He's an ensign. He's not even a commander or a lieutenant. He's not nothing. He's nothing.
He's that's exactly what he is. He is what Wesley would be had he gone through and graduated from the academy. This is
like
Harry
they were in the same
Kim's
class together.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, really, they would have been if you think
Yeah.
about it when the show aired, and because he's coming fresh out of the academy. This is his very first assignment,
Right.
is to Voyager. So yeah,
and I don't like that he gets kind of like dragged around by Paris. Like, I'm not a big fan of the character of Paris. This whole, he's a womanizer type. Again, the fact that he hooks up with some weird character on the holodeck all the time, like, that's just bizarre,
Ricky, right?
creepy.
Ricky, that was her
And
name.
the
The
fact
character
that-
he creates.
And the fact that, like, I joked earlier as you were doing the recap that Seska joked about she was going to go find Kim. But, like, that just proves my point of, like, Kim he's not, like, it's like he's a child on the ship and everyone's being perverted and perverse by wanting to have him hook up with someone. Like,
but in all fairness to Harry, he is like 23 at the time.
Sure,
So
I know.
He's not a total kid. He's like
No, I get
23,
it.
24 years old. But he is supposed to be the young, baby face
Right.
of the crew here. Everyone else they're all very experienced in one way or another, from whether they were actual Starfleet officers or Maquis who are thrown on later on, whatever. They're all very experienced. He is new to all of this. He thought he was going to be serving, 3 weeks with this crew of trained professionals that he was going to have all this time to learn from. Now all of a sudden he's basically been kit bashed and he's got to figure it out, but I think it's always funny too when they talk about, the way that they have the women kind of going for Harry. Back when this was all airing for the first time in the 90s, early on, there had actually been thoughts of removing the character from the show. They were going to have him, die or something and just write him off. But and I believe that was all through season 1 that there was this consideration. And then, coming towards the end of season 2, they didn't know if they were really going to have this character stay around for very long. But then a magazine came out, and I want to say it was something on the same level as, what are those, like GQ or one of those tabloid entertainment weeklies or whatever it is. And they listed him as one of the hottest Asians currently working in Hollywood. And when they saw that, they were like, well, we can't get rid of him now.
Yeah.
He's on the list. But he didn't just like make the list. He was like top. He was like top 5, top 10, something like that. And they were like, we've got one of the top hot Asians. We can't kill him.
I have to laugh because I'm not. This is obviously just to point out the history of it. I imagine there weren't a whole lot of Asian actors that they had to pick from. So,
this was in the early to mid 90s. This would have been 94, 95. So peak mid 90s. So I mean, there were a lot of Asian central shows and movies that were coming out around then. So there was definitely some of that.
At all.
But I think that was, it was just part of that. There was at the time there was a highlight on Asian actors in general, and it was shocking to them that a Star Trek actor had made this list and then was pretty high up in the
Right.
list. So they were like, yeah, we got to keep this guy. So yeah. Um, but Star Trek is no stranger to sexism, and the utilization of sex and attractability to sell a product is not something that they are above in any way.
Right.
So yeah, this was definitely going to be um, something they were going to focus on. And it's and we talked about Tom briefly. It's funny because Tom gets some of this later on. Tom and Harry both, because as the show goes on, obviously all of our actors are aging and bodies are changing and things like that. Well, I mean, the men were having to go through their own changes, and both Tom and Harry, they have a podcast called the Delta Flyers. They talk about how at one point they were getting, memos, and they was talking about their ever expanding waistlines, and how they needed to rein it in. Their boys' nights,
Oh no.
weekends of binge eating and drinking and partying and carousing and everything else was taking its toll, and they were being told they were going to have to break out the old girdle and stuff to squeeze them back into their uniforms.
It's I laugh now because I've seen various clips of the show in the future, and I avoid clips in particular because I don't want to spoil anything for myself. But every now and then, something pops up long enough for me to catch it, and I I have noticed that Paris, yeah, doesn't he's not quite the slim figure he is in season one, at least at some point. Um, I mean, again, I never watched for long, but I can understand if they might have had to say something at some point to somebody.
Yeah.
So
So I just think it's funny because we hear a lot about it from um, the female side of things, and we know that it was rampant. And we talked about it with DS9, Kira and Jadzia really getting a lot of that. Not to mention the Dabo girls and Lita in particular getting a lot of this scrutiny. And Kate Mulgrew talks about when she comes on the role as Janeway, she had a lot of this as well. And they were trying to. There was always this question of how to adequately portray her femininity without making her look too soft or too hard or too cold or too whatever. And the hair was the thing that they were always messing with, and so it's like almost every couple of episodes her hair changes, because they're trying to figure out which one is the look for her. And it's something that goes on for a very long time. It's like I don't think they really were satisfied with a set hairstyle for Janeway until like season 4. So I mean, could you imagine? Like, I mean, you already got to film for 16, 18 hours a day. Could you imagine that when you're showing up to do makeup and everything else, that a large part of that is someone discussing which hairstyle makes you look sexually available enough without also messing up your command presence? Like, what a weird conversation for a person to have. And again, went on for not just like a couple of weeks, or at least by the end of season 1 they had a set style. No, it was years until
right.
they finally were like, okay, this is it, we're gonna stop here. you know so but yeah, I just find it interesting that they finally started to highlight that the guys were also having their own versions of that. And it, like you said, it seems like Tom did a few things to like maintain, but then after a while he was like, look, I don't care anymore, just this is it.
I'm part of this
Whereas
past. What you gonna do about
yeah,
it?
I'm locked in. I've become a favorite, whatever. But Harry went the other way and really started to like work out a lot and kind of uh, beefed up there a bit. So
Mm,
yeah.
okay.
Well, all right, I think that's gonna just about do it for us on this episode of the Fire Caves here, talking about Chakotay being dumb or not, or how you feel about that. I still stand by what I said, and I also, well, I can't say I hope that he gets better because I know how the guy turns out and how everything turns out with Seska. But it's nice to go back and like re-watch and reevaluate these episodes, and kind of take different takeaways here. Next week, we'll be talking about the episode Heroes and Demons, which is an episode I enjoy because it has a Norse mythology tie in, and I'm a sucker for all mythology, really. So can't wait to really
Okay.
get the chance to discuss that a bit with us here. So look forward to that. Um, are you liking Voyager so far? Like, how do you feel now that we're 10 episodes in?
Yeah, as I've said basically before, I'm not in love with this cast. Like, say, so like the easiest example is TNG, obviously. TNG is about a group of hyper professional, very dedicated, highly skilled professional. Like they're on the freaking flagship. It's the Enterprise, like the best of the best. And so the reason that show is fun is because you're dealing with like the guys who are the top, like the cream of the cream of the crop. The best that you can get. Voyager is not that. This is a ship that was on a little mission that got sucked up into something like Ensign, Wong here. It's Wong, right? Yeah. Am I
Who?
Kim? Sorry, Kim. I don't.
He's
I'm looking.
played by Garrett Wong, but
Yeah,
yes.
that's why I got confused there for a second. 'Cause I'm looking at his page. Ensign Kim he's an ensign, and Paris is his, and the Marquis, and like this is not TNG, and
No.
so there's a part of me that has to be like, okay, and it's not Deep Space Nine either, but it has some Deep Space Nine elements. We have a integrated crew of sorts. Kira was a Bajoran the whole time; she was never technically part of the Federation. Um, you had Quark as a Neelix kind of character. So it's more like D Space Nine, but D Space Nine still had it wasn't a I'm trying to think, like Cisco wasn't having to wrestle a bunch of people that were, not necessarily working together. He's having to deal with outside problems still for the most part. But we
Yes.
have the regular plot elements of like the Bajoran faith, the prophets. We have Kai Wynn. We have Gul Dukat. So you have that recurring those recurring plot lines. But I mean, maybe Voyager will have more of those recurring plot lines like Deep Space Nine, but it is a show that does lend itself more toward that, monster of the month type episode where this
Hmm.
problem needs to be dealt this week, and we move on to the next planet and the next issue next week, that kind of thing. So I don't love this cast as much. You don't have the lovable Data, you don't have the lovable Geordi, you don't have the swashbuckling Commander Riker. You don't have the always professional Picard. Janeway. I've said it before. Like Janeway, like she did it in this episode. Like she looked at Chakotay at one point when she gave she said something and looked at Chakotay. It was almost like she was looking for confirmation or do you agree with me? You know, Picard didn't need to do that. Cisco didn't feel the need to look around at the other actors, the other characters to like we all on board kind of thing. So
Yeah.
um this one is taking me more time to get on board with. I'll
Yeah.
say that. Like I was preparing tonight, had to watch the episode. Part of me was like, we've been
That.
doing this for over 4 years, and
Yeah.
we just started a new one. Like there was even a little part of me in the back of my head that was like, better to end it early than get halfway through and then end it. But I was like, nah, no, it'll grow on me. It's got 7
it's
seasons. It's gonna get better with time. Every one of these shows does.
Yeah,
It
and there is something to that. Like that was the whole point of the show, was returning to that more episodic nature that we saw in both the original series and Next Generation. They
right,
really wanted to break away from serialization as we saw it in Deep Space Nine, which
right,
always cracks me up because all TV over the past 20 years has leaned heavily into serialization. If you
right,
didn't watch the last couple of episodes, you're not really going to understand what's going on in this most recent one. You're going to have to go back, you're going to have to do some research. And that's all because of the advent of streaming services and the ability to binge watch a show. People suddenly wanted to see a storyline evolve. And, this just goes to show that they didn't really think this through when they were thinking of the show in a more long term circumstance.
Ah,
The desire so much to recapture the magic of TNG in a new form guided so many of these shows that, I mean, it was really something that in the long run just hurt them. They really should have, you know, uh, let the shows be their own thing and
hmm
stop trying to give us a reason to compare it to Next Generation, because it's going to fail every time.
right,
And when you start to, this has nothing to do with the actors whatsoever, but when you
right,
start to look at the characters and you're like, okay, everyone on the Enterprise were these bright, competent, polished, professional officers.
right.
They were all tops in their fields. They were all heavily coveted. How many times did we watch on Next Gen hearing about someone wanting to promote one of the officers off of the
Yeah,
Enterprise to go and do something? How many times was Riker offered his own command? How many times did
right.
Beverly leave to go run all of Starfleet Medical? You
Just to
know,
come back. Yeah.
Right. They wanted to promote Picard at one point, make him commandant of Starfleet
This,
Academy. Like,
yeah.
these are people
And
that are
that's all early
highly
on. That's all in
early.
the
That's
first
early.
seasons. Yeah.
Right. That's early. They were doing this. These are all people who, Geordi, when the show first starts, is a lowly ensign. By season 2, he's the chief engineer.
Yeah.
Like, these are people who clearly show a lot of degree of skill and expertise that we
Right.
never really see again. You go to Deep Space Nine, and you do have a lot of highly qualified officers.
Yeah.
Dax is a genius in her own right. Bashir, again, genetically
Was
altered, but
literally.
yeah. But and then Cisco having to bring everyone into the fold, while, I mean, bringing this whole civilization into the Federation. That's a different kind of struggle. But then you
Right.
come to Voyager, and it's like they basically someone was. It was like they were trying to combine the two shows.
Yeah.
We want all of these aspects of TNG, but we also want kind of this tough grittiness of DS9.
Right.
How do we get that? And
Right.
they took these elements and tried to smash them together, but while it may have looked good initially, the execution was kind of poor. And it is something that's going to take a while for them to hammer out. And again, as a person who's watched this show many times, I feel like it gets there, like,
Yeah.
eventually. Overarchingly, it gets there. It takes it a while, but eventually it gets there.
Well, and
And I think that's why the show has become so endearing over time.
and as you were talking, I was just thinking, like, what if this show was Star Trek Enterprise, but it's Voyager, but it's the Enterprise crew. The show would be so different, but also not as good. And I'll admit it. The fact Picard and Riker and them, like, that's the point of them being on the Enterprise in the Alpha Quadrant, is they are the ones that are the shining beacon of what Starfleet is. But amongst Starfleet, this is a show about a lost crew in a lost part of space having to make do. And if you had just, like, what I'm saying is, like, if you had just thrown the Enterprise, the TNG crew onto this show, it wouldn't. I don't know if it would work or not. I'm not. Maybe it would. It
No,
would just be its own
this is
thing.
this
But
is this is one of the favorite comparisons that gets thrown around all the time. Would the various crews survive, or how would they operate in each other's situations?
right,
Would the Voyager crew do well um, in a TNG setting, and vice versa, and so forth? Um, yeah, I love that conversation, and we'll have to, like, save that and have that. But,
yeah,
like, it's one of my favorite, and people do it all the time. Like, would Picard have done what Janeway did here, or whatever it is? And a lot of times the answer is no.
right,
That's what always gets me about so much of it, is a lot of times the answer to those questions is no. Like, Picard would
yeah,
not have done that.
right.
Riker would never have done that. Cisco, maybe.
Yeah, Riker wouldn't have been suckered
Yeah.
by what's her face.
Yeah, Riker
Seska.
would not have been, suckered by Seska. They may have had in the past been whatever, but they made
Yeah,
a
that's
choice
true.
to, and we see evidence of that with him and Deanna, right? Like,
Yeah,
they
he
made
can
a
be
choice to
brutal
not
to his
ever,
exes.
yeah, they made a choice not to be, and so he would, and if she would have come under suspicion, he might have been broken up about it, but he would
Yeah,
not have betrayed the command structure and
Yeah.
given her insight into the very investigation about her. He never would
Right.
have done that, you know. But
Yeah.
it would have also been Riker who led the charge on the investigation and uncovered the most of the information that was the most damaging of all.
Right.
He wouldn't have left that to Worf to do. He would have worked with Worf, sure, but it would have been Riker leading the investigation, not
Right.
Tuvok.
Right.
So yeah, lots of differences here. We don't have time to get into all that. We're going to run over forever. But we
Yeah.
may just set aside after we get a little bit deeper into this and into some
Well,
more
we'll save it
complex
for that
situations.
we always do an episode in between seasons, so maybe
Yes.
that's the kind of thing we'll talk about.
Yeah. Because there are a couple
we
things
already
that
need to
come up.
talk about comparing the commanders to each other. So yeah, it'll all wrap up into a nice bow.
Yeah.
For what to talk about. Yeah.
But really quick to this particular statement here, the thing Sisko would have exterminated the Kazon. You know what? I kind of agree. I feel like when they tried to take them hostage the first time with the caretaker array and everything like that, I feel like Sisko would have been like, you know what? We're just going to blow everything up. Like, you're not going to stop us.
So that's another good example, though, is like if he had only Voyager technology. I mean, I'm not saying the Voyager's a bad ship, but it's not quite the Enterprise, right? So
and it's not quite the Defiant either. The Defiant, for all intents and purposes, is a warship.
It's a warship.
You know, yeah. So I'm just saying, like,
maybe the
Defiant
Voyager,
yeah. So
again, you're as I was thinking about it, look, you know what? This show, it truly wouldn't be the same show if we just flop the cast.
No,
we would have so much differences that it
yeah,
has to be this way. So yeah.
All right, guys, that's gonna
work, so.
Yes. Well, all right, that's going to do it for us on this episode. Of course, come back next week when we'll be talking about the episode Heroes and Demons and maybe some other stuff as well. You can find us and follow us anywhere you happen to do your podcast. If you want to listen to us, of course, I do it on Spotify, so you can check us out there, or Apple Podcasts, Apple Music, whatever it's called. All of our video content is, of course, available on YouTube, so check us out there. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything you want to say to us, whatever, please feel free to do so. Send it to us through YouTube or through our Facebook page, whatever. Just remember, be polite, because we won't answer you if you're not. Or maybe we'll answer you, but it won't be polite either, and that's never a good place anybody wants to be honest. So
we've always been polite.
We've always been. I'm just saying, maybe, you know, like if they're not polite, who knows, you know. But yeah, just that's it. So yeah, we missed you all as well. We'll be back. We'll try to stay on our regular schedule, of course, but again, if sickness comes up, then we gotta do what we gotta do. So
right.
But all right, guys, that's going to do it for us for this one. And until next time, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.